Hi everyone, I'm Amena and welcome back explorers to my vlog. Also, if you happen to be new here or are a repeat visitor, be welcome. Be sure to also look at the description below for all credits given. And with that said, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So, let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons and what it truly is. At its core, Dungeons and Dragons is quite literally a role playing game. Originally, they had miniatures and tables, and it was war games that were played by military enthusiasts, I think. But one day, these people were a bunch of them got together and said, why don't we put all this in dungeons and add fanciful beasts like dragons and have all sorts of things? So you have a very unique game that you don't necessarily need miniatures or tape measures or anything like that. Instead, you need pen, paper, dice, and, well, you can have books, can have video games, and yeah, you can have movies too. Oh my gosh. Some people have actually played Dungeons and Dragons in order to make vast Dungeons and Dragons book series. Uh, I'm not sure what it's called, but I do know that there is a trilogy of books called Time of the Twins, and something like that. There's been other kinds of. Oh, and let's not forget that with Dungeons and Dragons, other role playing games respond. Oh my gosh. Like, have you heard of Vampire the Masquerade? Or, stuff like that. That was a. Or Ravenloft. That's another Dungeons and Dragons game. Oh, and yes, Death Trap Dungeon takes place in Dungeons and Dragons. So there's so many things. So yeah, when I mentioned books, these books are usually if it isn't the fictitious, if it isn't the published fiction books, it's the Dungeon Master's Guide, the player's Dungeon Master, uh, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeon Master's Guide, Dungeons and Dragons, Monstrous Manual, Dungeons and Dragons, Player's Handbook. And yes, there have been multiple volumes since it started. And there's also modules, like little offshoot stories that are told within the same world. Oh, Forgotten Realms. That's what it was. Time with the twins and everything like that happens within the Forgotten Realms Dungeons and Dragons universe. Now, when I mentioned that some people play Dungeons and Dragons in order to write books, that's the Forgotten Realms stories. And yes, those stories actually became animated cartoons or animated movies. They're not the same as the Dungeons and Dragons movies that I mentioned in the last blog. Now, when you come right down to it, every good game needs a narrator, or, in this case, a dungeon master. The dungeon master is the person who creates the story, the environments, and everything, where your players are going through, who you're fighting, who you're interacting with, and everything else. So, a good dungeon master is not only your ally, but also your antagonist, enemy. They give you hints, they give you clues, they throw monsters at you to fight, they level you up, just like any other video game, only you're using pen, paper, dice, and your guides. Oh, and when I mentioned pen and paper, that is usually for somebody to take time and make a map of everything that's going on. You enter a town. You want to know what the town looks like, right? That's where your map maker comes. That's where your map maker comes in. Of course, you don't always have to do that. But anyway, you have your players and you have your dungeon masters. And a good dungeon master is also a very good storyteller, weaving the story that you're adventuring in. Now, they give you hints, but they're smart enough to let you choose your own path. And depending on which path you take, depends on the story they wind up telling. And a good dungeon master has many stories already prepared. Now, with all that said, I think I've talked your ears off long enough, so I'm going to end this episode here and leave you all with this. If you have been enjoying my content, please feel free to leave a like and or subscribe. You can also leave a comment down below in the comment section. Be sure to hit that notification bell because YouTube doesn't always like to share. Be safe, be healthy, and as always, be true to you. Mena, signing off.